From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal's Week in Review. And what a week it was here in Alabama and in the capital city. The state continues to mourn for the 4 young people who were killed Sunday in Dadeville during a mass shooting at a Sweet 16 birthday party. Details were slow to trickle out this week as local, state, and federal investigators worked to piece together what happened. Now, 6 people have been arrested and charged with reckless murder in the shooting rampage. According to the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, those being held in the Tallapoosa County Jail without bond are 17-year-old Tyreek McCullough of Tuskegee, 16-year-old Travis McCullough of Tuskegee, 20-year-old Latron Brown of Tuskegee, 20-year-old Lamar Hill Jr. of Auburn, and 19-year-old Willie George Brown of Auburn. The latest arrest was an unnamed 15-year-old juvenile. Let's remember the victims: 19-year-old Sia Collins of Opelika, 23-year-old Corbin Holston of Dadeville, 17-year-old Kiki Smith of Dadeville, and 18-year-old Phil Dowdle of Camp Hill. Tallapoosa County District Attorney Mike Segrest said his office and police investigators owe it to the victims and their families to gather evidence methodically and prosecute properly in order to deliver justice. It's fair to say that the tragedy in Dadeville hung heavy over the State House this week. The horror of the crime, the sadness of the lives lost, and the instinct to see if policies can be changed in response. Capitol Journal's Randy Scott reports on how Dadeville defined the week in the Alabama Legislature.
The week started with Governor Kay Ivey sending condolences to family members of the Dadeville shooting victims.
We remember the 4 who lost their lives far too soon, and we are keeping their loved ones close to our hearts in this devastating time.
When the Alabama House convenes for work, Dadeville Representative Ed Oliver addresses the chamber.
It is a sad day for the state when something so senseless happens. Our hearts go out to the families and friends who lost loved ones in this attack, and I ask you to continue to pray that healing and recovery for this community of Dadeville.
The work begins in the House with lawmakers discussing proposals such as House Bill 164, which sets new guidelines for teaching more financial responsibility.
Skill sets include types of bank accounts, balancing a checking account, basic principles of money management, types of loans, basic principles of personal insurance policies, percentages, computing interest rates, simple contracts, types of savings and investments.
We have kids now that cannot write a check. We know that a lot of businesses, some do, I'm a business person, some I do direct deposit and some I do checks. But they still need to know the basics before they get out there.
Citizens also came to the State House to talk to lawmakers about updates to gun control in the aftermath of the Dadeville tragedy.
It's heartbreaking, and I, quite honestly, I fluctuate between anger and heartbreak because we can do something, and that's the reason I want to get my friends together to do what we can and spend time in this legislature.
We're standing in support with the families of those 4 young people who passed away, the 32 people that are still hospitalized or fighting for their lives or dealing with their injuries as a result of senseless gun violence.
We need to have universal background checks. We need to make sure that these kids don't have access to these guns. And we also need to make sure that the mentally ill don't have access to these guns. So I don't think that we're asking for anything outrageous. I just think that we're asking for simple, responsible gun legislation to protect all the citizens of Alabama.
Thursday, as news spreads about the arrest of 6 suspects tied to the shooting, lawmakers come together to help the healing process.
One of the victims that were killed is the granddaughter of a very close family friend of ours, as well as a very prominent businessman in Jefferson County, Mr. Clifford Toney, Sr., who owns Integrity Funeral Home. His granddaughter was Shantivia Kiki Smith, 17 years old, a very vibrant, very beautiful young lady who was about to graduate.
My heart is heavy this whole week. as I mourn with my friend and my brother. Not only my friend and my brother, but also my constituent in which I serve, as he mourned the death of his granddaughter. And all of you that have children never want to get those kinds of calls. And so, Mr. Speaker, I would ask that this House pause just for a moment of silence.
Though it wasn't necessarily directly in response to Dadeville, State Representative Philip Ensler rolled out a package of gun and community safety proposals this week. He represents Montgomery and says his constituents' number one concern is addressing crime, including gun violence. His package includes a red flag bill, legislation to prohibit black market ghost guns, and a measure to ban trigger activators that can turn handguns into automatic-like weapons.
Red flag laws they're very specific criteria where family members or law enforcement can go get a court order if someone basically presents a real credible threat to themselves or others. So again, it's not taking away their guns forever. It's not at all infringing on their rights. Like any court process or right, there's due process around it, but really going to work that on the House side. Then, the second one dealing with ghost guns. I mean, you can go online today, and the way we may, order something on Amazon and it gets delivered to our door. I mean, people are ordering parts and putting together guns at home. And the real issue with that is that they're then circumventing any federal background checks, and they don't have a serial number. So if someone then uses that ghost gun in a crime, it's much harder than for law enforcement to trace that back to a particular person. So again, the ban on selling or possessing ghost guns, not infringing on any right? You very much can own a handgun and any other guns that are currently allowed, but this is just saying we want to have things that conform with federal law and that law enforcement can trace back, because the ghost guns, they can get passed around and then have no idea, who actually legally owns it.
For months, we've been reporting on the effort to reauthorize and revamp the state's economic development incentives laws. Now, that effort is complete. The package of bills known as the Game Plan received final passage this week and were signed into law by Governor Kay Ivey. We were at the bill signing.
Team Alabama, we have officially reached the end zone. To the men and women of the Alabama Legislature, thank you. Thank you for your swift action and your successful passage of the Game Plan legislation that we are setting up. Because of your successful passage of the Game Plan legislation, we're setting Alabama up for success over the next 5 years and beyond. We are ensuring that Alabama will continue to stack up strong next to our competitors. Billions more will be invested in our state, and good-paying jobs will continue funneling here for our workforce.
These 4 bills and the Game Plan were really about securing our economic future in the state. It's about diversifying our economy. It's about creating more opportunity for real career and job opportunities for people across our state. It's about attracting new investment. It's about building job opportunities and really taking Alabama forward into the next 10 to 20 years.
State leaders are excited about how some of these law changes can create opportunities for improving Alabama's image nationally and globally. Capitol Journal's Karen Goldsmith has that story.
Senate President Pro Tem Greg Reed has had a significant impact on the state's current business recruitment success.
When we started with the Jobs Act, I carried that bill in the legislature. And then Growing Alabama, I carried that bill in the Senate. And then the AIM Act, I carried that bill in the legislature. And the renewal, this has been a topic important to me for a number of years while I've served in the legislature.
He shares how things were done before these bills became law.
Prior to that time, Alabama would borrow money, bond resource, to be able to give to companies that would come and locate in our state. And that was a practice that we saw in other states around the nation.
He notes that the 2015 Alabama Jobs Act changed that method to a pay-as-you-go program.
If you agree and contract with Alabama that you're going to do this with your factory, your industrial project, whatever you're doing to come bring jobs to our state, bring investment, pay your taxes, and then once you've done what you said you're going to do, then those opportunities can come back to you in the agreement that you have with the state.
Alabama leaders say this winning formula of businesses receiving their tax credits after keeping their promises to the state has netted a return on investment of 173%. And
it's created 40,000 jobs, $22 billion of investment have come to the state as a result of that, a lot of that in rural counties. And making Alabama, for example, the #2 automobile manufacturer in the country. That's pretty phenomenal. We have a lot of aerospace investment, steel industry investment. We're now seeing a lot of tech type industries come in.
Even with all of the success, there is room for improvement, and lawmakers have challenged themselves to address those areas. One way is by moving certain small business, rural business, and minority-owned business from the umbrella of the state's Commerce Department to Innovate Alabama.
You look at Commerce focuses on a lot of large jobs, 2,000, 1,000, 3,000 jobs. Well, when you start looking at rural areas, a lot of those jobs are not going to go to rural areas. Now, the Innovation Commission can then look at it and start looking at 500 jobs, 1,000 jobs, 200 jobs, 50 jobs. That makes a difference in small rural communities. It can start looking individually at incentives to give to women-owned business, veteran-owned business.
And all of the state's leaders behind the game plan package of bills that will further secure Alabama's economic future say the bills show the state is truly thinking outside of the box. For Capitol Journal, I'm Karen Goldsmith.
Let's review what these bills do. The Enhancing Alabama's Economic Progress Act renews the Alabama Jobs Act and increases the cap the state can leverage toward projects to $475 million in 2027. The Site Evaluation and Economic Development Strategy Act, or SEEDS, allows the State Industrial Development Authority to accelerate development of industry-ready sites. The Innovation and Small Business Act aims to grow the state's innovation economy and support underrepresented businesses. And finally, the Enhancing Transparency Act requires the Department of Commerce to publish state incentives used online. The bills sailed through the legislature with little resistance. However, one state senator took to the well this week to express his frustration at the necessity of states having to use tax credits and other incentives to lure companies in the first place. State Senator Arthur Orr said Congress should intervene and put guardrails on the process so that states could compete on their own merits without economic sweeteners.
And if we did not arm Mr. Canfield and the Department of Commerce, our economic development teams scattered across the state, with the measures of this Jobs Act, we undeniably would not be competitive. You would like to think D.C. or Washington, our friends at the federal level, would create a law that would ban such incentives and say they wouldn't be allowed to allow a competitive field among the states based on workforce, based on sites, rail, infrastructure, those kind of things. But instead, they let us pit taxpayer dollars from one state against another.
In other legislative action this week, the House took up the controversial issue of transgender athletes. Last year, the legislature passed a law requiring that K-12 students can only compete in sports as the gender they were assigned at birth. House Bill 261 from Representative Susan DuBose would extend that requirement to the state's colleges and universities. DuBose argued that the bill is about preserving girls' and women's access to fair competition, while some Democrats argued the measure is unnecessary. This one didn't line up neatly along party lines, though, as even some Democrats spoke in favor of DuBose's bill.
Well, it's based on the biological definition that the doctor determines at that time. And it's based on the biological definition, which could include chromosomal as well. But it's genetics and biology, science determines your sex. So it's based on your sex.
It is almost like we are stopping some sort of epidemic in Alabama that is occurring, and I'm not sure that anybody in here can find one example of this ever happening in the state of Alabama.
Well, it's happening nationwide, and there's no reason to think that it could not happen here. We don't want it to happen even one time.
Well, no, I mean, it doesn't happen often because it's not happening as we've described it here, because the NCAA and many other organizations have adopted their own rules in regards to dealing with this. This is just an opportunity for people to create an issue or a solution that is looking for a problem.
A man is physically stronger than a woman. And that's Bible. And so it's important to make sure that we protect our baby daughters.
That bill passed 83-5 with several Democrats abstaining. The issue of crime is an emerging topic this session. State prosecutors recently endorsed a slate of bills they say gives them better tools to protect the community. And the Senate Judiciary Committee this week advanced legislation targeting gang violence. Senator Will Barfoot came on Capitol Journal to explain his bill.
The bill does three things, though. If you are arrested and identified as for a criminal event or breach of criminal statute, state of Alabama, if that's a felony, a Class D felony, and you're proven beyond a reasonable doubt that you committed that crime, and then if you're proven beyond a reasonable doubt that you are a gang member, for which the bill lays out that criteria, then that felony that you're convicted of would be up sentenced from a D to a C, or if the underlying event was a Class C felony, you'd be sentenced like it was a Class B, and so forth. So there's that portion of it, and that relates to specifically having to prove, number one, that there was a criminal offense that you committed beyond a reasonable doubt, and number two, that you are in fact a gang member as outlined in the bill. The second thing that bill does is, if during the commission of a crime that you have a firearm during the commission of that crime, and that crime is to benefit or promote gang activity for which you're convicted, again beyond a reasonable doubt, the possession of that firearm during the commission of that felony offense, criminal activity, they would carry a minimum of 5 years consecutive sentence on there. If you, during the course of that criminal activity for which you were convicted, if you brandished it, pulled it, in other words, there would be a mandatory 7-year consecutive sentence. And then if you use that firearm during the commission of that felony that benefited a gang or gang activity, there would be a 10-year enhancement to it. And that statute, those statutes are not unsimilar to what other states have already had in place for a while.
Barfoot received pushback from Democrats on the committee, including Minority Leader Bobby Singleton, who argued that the details of the bill would make enforcement problematic and that it could conflict with other laws.
Mind you that your definition calls for legal profiling. And when it does that, because it says that these officers see people dressed a certain way, wearing a certain thing, now they're actually profiled. And also on line 160, you will understand that you got it for possession of a weapon. Many of you around this table voted for us to be able to carry a gun legally without a permit. So it's not illegal to have a gun in your possession if you're standing on that street corner. It's not illegal. So even if the person has a gun on them and they never use it, then we want to elevate a crime just for having possession of a weapon, when possession of a weapon in the state of Alabama is legal now, and those of you around this table voted on that. Very clear. That need to be removed out of this bill, the possession of a weapon, unless they use that weapon in the furtherance of that crime. That's where it be. But other just having that possession needs to take away, and we need to deal with this definition, because I think it's all about legal profiling. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As I said before, we'll continue to work together to try to make this bill a better bill.
This was a special week for us at Alabama Public Television, as our annual Young Heroes program took place. Each year, APT looks for high school students who have excelled in academics, given of themselves through school involvement and community service, and, most importantly, succeeded in the face of extraordinary difficulty or hardship. This year's Young Heroes were honored at a special dinner at the Capital City Club, where they were presented with college scholarships.
And Alabama Public Television takes great pleasure in recognizing this outstanding young lady's achievements.
I'd just like to thank my family and my teachers for making me what I am today, and I'd also like to thank Alabama Public Television for giving me this opportunity and this award. Thank you.
Alabama Public Television is proud to present Elise Mae Dean as one of the 5 Young Heroes of Alabama for 2023.
I just want to say thank you to APT for this opportunity, and thank you to Ms. Cirilli for nominating me.
Alabama Public Television proudly recognizes Ja'Cory Gaddis as one of the 5 Young Heroes of Alabama for 2023.
I just want to thank God for this and my family, and I want to thank everyone here for giving me this award. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Alabama Public Television proudly presents Ashley Goodlow as one of the 5 Young Heroes of Alabama for 2023.
First off, I want to thank God. Without God, I wouldn't be here in this position today. Next, I'd like to thank my family, specifically my mom, Hannah, for being here and being so supportive. Big thanks to APT for awarding me this honor. Also, huge thanks to my teachers for helping me develop into the leader I am today. More specifically, Miss Nina Dial, our FBLA advisor. She's helped me so much, especially through my whole process of schooling and developing me. Thank y'all.
Alabama Public Television is proud to recognize Joshua as one of the 5 Young Heroes of Alabama for 2023.
I don't want to ramble on for too long, but I just want to thank APT first for this amazing opportunity for all of us. And I'm really glad that I get to be in a room with all of y'all too and get to hear all of your stories. And I'm really thankful for Ms. Patel. She's such an amazing teacher, and she is the one who nominated me, and she is a beacon of hope and light in our school. Everybody always goes to her whenever anybody needs anything. She always just makes everybody feel like everything's going to be okay. And then, just throughout my whole entire life, my teachers have been such a huge part of my life. And last, I'd like to thank my family because they, through all of our difficulties and everything, I feel like we've stayed together really well, and we just always motivate everybody through everything and each other and help each other. So thank you so much for this award.
And we were honored to host our Young Heroes here in studio for a behind-the-scenes tour. I want to say again, congratulations to all of them. We're very proud of you. This week also saw the legislative softball game. The second annual Battle of Goat Hill pitted House members versus Senate members, with some staff and a few ringers also participating. Of course, we were there to join in the fun. The event raised funds for the tornado victims in Selma. Here's our footage from the game. It's the dugout on the house side. This takes place at Riverwalk Stadium in downtown Montgomery, home of the Montgomery Biscuits. And so you got to remember the House has 105 members. Well, that's Wesley Britt. He's not a member of the House. I told you there are some ringers. And the Senate has 35 members. So, they had to kind of cut down on the number. Oh, and there's force of nature, Jabbo Wagoner, senator from Vestavia, 50 years in the legislature. Lots of staff and lobbyists and family members enjoying the fun. That's Representative Lomax, a freshman member up to bat, running out the throw. That's Representative Lovern, the rules chairman from Auburn. He had a few pretty good at-bats. It's Representative Chris Blackshear pitching to State Senator Garland Gudger. And Jess Skaggs, the Chief of Staff for Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth, showing off there with the slide. That's Majority Leader Scott Stadhagen. He pops out to Drew Harrell, also not a senator. Jay Hovey, this brand new state senator from Auburn, he had a few great at-bats. But I have to say, most of the scoring in this game came off of errors. As you can see, this is Marshall Long, the voice of the Alabama Senate. I think more errors accounted for points.
We've been struggling fielding the ball right now, and we've got a lot of errors. We still plenty of time to play.
Senator Marika Coleman and Senator Linda Coleman Madison. There's me talking with Paul Lee and Randy Scott. Secretary of State Wes Allen. Representative Standridge getting some swings in. This is Hovey again. He's got some power. Again, this and Marshall Long again tagging in. This event raised money for the tornado victims of Selma, and there's not an official total yet because all that is handled by the Biscuits organization.
We're great.
We're having a blast.
Hold on, one more inning.
One more inning. That's right.
It.
And the coaches are going to be celebrating.
That's right.
Hey, we winning, baby. We winning. That's all we do is win. We the champs, and we're maintaining our championship.
I was told it could be as much as $30,000 raised for the victims. Senate won last year, and this is the final at bat. Senate's going to win again this year, 12-6. And trust me, it did not sit well with members of the House. They're not happy to lose 2 years in a row.
Hey, it was a good cause. I was glad to do a lot of fun. Glad to help the people in Selma out. So I think it was a great night.
Great opportunity for all of us to be together. We had a great time, a lot of fun. Speaker and I worked well together on things that are important to the people of Alabama, but also on softball field. So we had a great time, a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're going to get them next year too, by the way.
We'll be right back with tonight's guests.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
Montgomery native Percy L. Julian was an internationally acclaimed chemist. The third African-American to receive a PhD in chemistry, he specialized in the chemistry of natural products and their synthesis in the laboratory. This technology is very important in medicines, food products, paints, and firefighting foams, among other things. Julian received many awards, including election to the National Academy of Sciences and the National Inventors Hall of Fame.
You're watching Alabama Public Television.
Joining me next is Dr. Mark LeQuire, Chairman of the Medical Association of the State of Alabama Board. Doc, thanks for coming on the show.
Todd, happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, we saw y'all in the State House last week advocating over this issue of a physician shortage in Alabama, and sounded pretty serious. Can you kind of walk me through maybe how we got here and just sort of the acuteness of this problem?
I'll do my best. I'd still love to see a study or something that says this is exactly what happened to do this. We can swing the bat at a few things. One was the COVID pandemic, fatigue, burnout, stress. Physicians who were probably some years away from retiring decided they were just going to retire and leave the workforce. There's been a growth in alternative practice styles, in particular telemedicine for what I do, teleradiology.
Mm-hmm.
I think the pandemic started that, where you can just work at home and not have to come to work. But the issue with that in healthcare is, most of our work is delivered at a hospital or at a clinic or at a center or somewhere. So it's hard to get individuals to come and do more of a traditional pathway that we've had in the past few years. And then in my specialty in particular, for some reason, fewer people are going into it. Fewer people are going into emergency medicine. So the critical care areas where physicians are needed the most are often the most short.
Wow. Well, so that's a shortage of physicians. What about the what about the number of people seeking care? I would imagine during COVID it probably went down because everything went down, but is it back up?
To say that our position is overrun would be understated. I started this little witticism several months ago with my colleagues who don't do what I do, other specialties. Are you busy? Yes. How busy are you? Busier than I've ever been in my life. So we're seeing more patients than we've ever seen, and they're more ill than we've ever seen.
You say more ill. That's interesting. Well, what would
coming in with later stage disease, so maybe this is part of the COVID thing. We don't know yet. Again, the studies haven't been done, or if they're in progress, but their stages of disease are coming in at a later manifestation than we'd seen in days gone by.
So tell me what happens. We have you've established this doctor shortage, the physician shortage. We have a huge demand increase. What happens then in the treatment process? Does that, I guess you're spread thin, but do mistakes get made? Is it really a problem, a pretty broad problem in that kind of way? What is it? How does it manifest itself?
Well, the thing that came to mind, so I'll just answer your question when you ask it, is all my partners are getting frustrated. They're telling me if you don't do something, we're going to quit. So what it's doing is making the crisis worse because you're working so hard that takes you to the point of, there's a phrase for it now, we call it physician burnout, but anybody in the medical field can have burnout.
Because they're seeing more and more patients, and it's just, it's burnout.
We're doing good. I don't think the quality is suffering. So I haven't seen that in my practice and in other practices, but it's just the sheer volume. If I work a weekend, and the following week, there's times I just don't want to go back to work again after that.
Well, that's natural. That's natural. So I know that there's some legislation that could begin to sort of offer some solutions here. Walk me through the bills that you're advocating.
So it's the Physician Workforce Act. It has 3 prongs to it. One is to get physicians who live out of state that want to move to Alabama into the state easier.
Okay.
The second prong is to allow foreign medical graduates who are here training to get into the workforce a little bit earlier. And then the third is for graduating medical students who may not be offered a residency program or postgraduate education to be able to still work under the supervision of a physician and render care and services in our state.
Okay. Well, that first part about getting doctors into the state easier, I'm guessing that's a licensure kind of thing, right?
It is. There's some requirements, particularly for testing, that physicians have to take. I'll give you a personal experience with that. I'm a radiologist. We not uncommonly want to have radiologists come to Alabama who live in a different state. They haven't had a licensure exam in 10 years, which is one of our requirements. So what do they have to do? They have to take the same licensure examination that we all took when we finished medical school. Well, these, whether it's my field or somebody else's field, are all eminently qualified individuals. Some of them have been in academic institutions, they're teachers, they're professors. But they got to take the same exam that they took when they graduated from med school. Well, none of us have looked at the esoterics of biochemistry in that length of time, and it becomes a real roadblock.
Yeah, and I imagine those restrictions, as those rules are in place for, consumer protection and making sure everybody's safe and everything. But does it go too far in some circumstances? And
well, it does when it prevents a qualified physician from coming here to practice, and it's too far, particularly given the critical need we have, in my opinion.
And so, I guess I want to make sure that there wouldn't be any drop off in the quality of care or something like that, just for removing that red tape.
In my opinion, no, because that's a very basic exam that assesses your competency after you've graduated from medical school.
Okay.
So what would be needed to assess my competency now? I've been in my subspecialty for over 20 years. So you should test a person's competency in what they're actually doing, and not something that they haven't done in 20 years.
20 years, yeah. We'll talk about the international medical graduates and that component, and allowing them to apply for a medical license after 2 years instead of 3. I mean, it's only 1 year, but that could accelerate things.
So it would get more physicians into our workforce quickly. And the secondary effect in that, in my opinion, is that once you get them into the local workforce, they're much more likely to stay when they finish their training.
I see. And you talked about so that they had the ability to train with a physician. Why is that such an important process? It sounds almost like an apprenticeship.
Well, that's a different category than the one we just mentioned. So one of the situations which has developed in postgraduate medical education in America is that more medical students are being graduated than we have postgraduate residency slots. So there is a number of physicians each year that have finished med school that have nowhere to go to continue their training. So the proposal in this legislation would be that those individuals can come work under the supervision of a physician and continue to grow and experience and get their resume such that when they reapply for a residency training the next year, they have a greater likelihood of getting in. One thought that came to my mind in looking at the legislation was being a surgical assistant to a surgeon. It'd be a great thing to do. That's what I did through med school, and I loved it.
Interesting, even though you did not end up in surgery.
Right. But it's a great thing to do.
Well, you were here in the State House last week. Your organization, MASA, is very present. How important is it to have physicians be involved in the political process? I'm thinking, not a lot of doctors become state lawmakers. It's a lot of lawyers and things like that. So a lot of them may not be fluent in what you're talking about. How important is it for y'all to be here to communicate these issues and to communicate how severe the problem is?
So we are caretakers of patients. We are patients' advocates, and in legislative issues, we have to be here to advocate for our patients. So, short answer to your question, it's critical that physicians are involved in the legislative process.
And what kind of feedback did you get just from that, day of being here at the State House from lawmakers? Do you think that they, was the feedback that they understand that this is a problem, that it needs to be addressed?
Absolutely, and in particular, the two bill sponsors touched me deeply by saying, we're going to get this for you and we're going to help you. And that's what I got from my visit up here.
Good.
They're doing it to help us, and that I get goosebumps telling you that. It's just wonderful that they'll help us.
Well, that's good to hear. And we're going to be following this bill. We reported on it last week, but we want to, continue following this issue. And even after, so let's say it becomes law, even after that, to update people on where we are, because just because you pass a bill, you're not finished.
Yeah, no, we want it to work.
That's right. That's right. Well, Doc, thanks again for coming on the show and walking me through some of these complicated issues that it's hard for me to understand, but it really helps me and the audience understand.
Happy to come anytime you need me.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
Joining me next is Holly McCorkle, Executive Director of the Alabama Council for Behavioral Health Care. Holly, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Todd.
Well, could you share with our viewers a little bit about the council and what its mission is here in the state?
Yeah. So the council is made up of 20 community mental health providers. We deliver services for those with mental illness, addictions, intellectual and developmental disabilities. The 20 organizations serve about 115,000 people across the state each year. And many of the people that we serve will require some type of lifelong support. And our main funding source is the Alabama Department of Mental Health.
So we talk a lot about mental health services here about it from a policy standpoint, but y'all are the providers of that service.
That is right. So when you hear about people getting treatment or services through the Department of Mental Health, almost always it's delivered through a community provider in the 67 counties.
Interesting. But you also have a background from the Department of Mental Health, right?
I do.
You served there as Chief of Staff?
I was the Director of Legislative and Constituent Affairs.
Right. Okay, sorry.
So I did.
So does that background really serve you in this role?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, while working there, I was able, sometimes the system of care can be pretty complicated. So working at the department really allowed me to learn that system, learn how people access services. And then, I also have a background at the legislature. So
I was going to ask you about that because that's kind of how we got to know each other.
Yep.
You were here in the legislature, worked here 6 or 7 years.
Yep, that's right.
And so now, you spend a lot of time kind of advocating in the legislature.
That's right.
So that has to help having those relationships and just the background of how things work here.
Oh, absolutely. And, I love being able to use that knowledge that I have from working at the Department of Mental Health and the knowledge I have from working here in the Senate to advocate for many times people who don't have the opportunity to come down here to Montgomery and advocate for the services and the treatment that they need.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about some of the issues, during your time there and during your time here at the council. Mental health has really been heightened as an issue, and thankfully more investments have been made in mental health. It's I remember back in the 2000s, early 2000s, mid 2000s, where nobody wanted to talk about it.
Right.
Really, it was such a, let's just put it in the closet and not talk about it. But here recently, there's been more attention paid, more investments made, these crisis centers and everything. So some progress. But there are still gaps. And I was hoping you would speak to what those gaps are and what investments need to be made.
Absolutely. So I would be remiss if I did not first just thank Governor Ivey, the legislative leadership on both sides of the aisle. They have made mental health a priority. And I think I can speak it's the biggest priority that the legislature has made in our lifetime for sure, is standing up the crisis services and trying to invest in more access to care. But this year, the Department of Mental Health did request $30.6 million, and that is because to bolster the community providers workforce. These are services, outpatient services, day treatment services, residential programs. I mean, people need those supports in a home. Sometimes that's where they live. And, so we have got to be able to pay professionals an appropriate wage. Right now, direct support professionals, those are the people that might work in a residential home or have a lot of hands-on time with individuals. They're making $11, $12 an hour. You can't compete with. I mean, we can't compete with fast food restaurants. We can't compete with retailers, and and this is hard work.
I was about to say it's a pretty demanding job, and emotionally draining.
Right, and so we want to be able to recruit people that want to work in this field, and we believe they need to be paid adequate wages. On our master's level clinicians, they're making less than a bachelor's level starting teacher. Many times they'll leave our organizations and automatically start making $10,000, $20,000 more somewhere else. And we do not blame them for wanting to, make a little more money and support their families. But we, this $30.6 million that the Department of Mental Health requested would allow us to start paying our employees more of like the market wages so that we can retain the quality people we have, because you don't get in the mental health field for the money. You get into it because you care about people, but we definitely deserve to pay people what they deserve professionally.
You got to make a living, and I mean we've talked so much about the workforce issue in general. Businesses having a hard time finding workers, so it's kind of across the spectrum. But this is a sector that's essential. Like it's you can't go without mental health workers.
Absolutely. I mean, we learned during the pandemic, we stayed open. We were delivering services 24/7, 365. These are essential services. And, you talk about the workforce problems across the board, and then you talk about healthcare. I mean, healthcare is even after post-pandemic, I mean, it is just very difficult to hire certain positions, and that average market salary has just risen, and so we've got to keep up and meet the demand for our services.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was talking with Dr. LeQuire about the physician health shortage and everything, and he was talking about a rise in demand for health services. Is that I mean, just across the board, and is that true also in mental health? Has there been a rise in demand post-pandemic?
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that we talk about is people experience mental health challenges due to isolation. And you think about how there were so many people that were isolated during the pandemic. We lost so many people. And so people definitely are experiencing anxiety and depression more frequently. And so the demand for mental health services, and that's not unique to Alabama, across the country has risen. So demand is rising and our workforce struggles are increasing. And so, right now, about 1 in 5 positions are vacant. I did a survey of my members, and their vacancy rate from the last 3 years has increased 50%. So this is backed up by data. We have got to be able to recruit and retain.
Mm-hmm. So it comes down to a budgetary thing as the general fund goes through, and I know maybe some ETF dollars, but mainly the general fund goes through the process. That's what you're talking to legislators about.
Absolutely. My members have been to town and met with their legislators, and I know that the legislature is looking to find this funding. I know they are working on it, but it's just really important for everyone to understand the challenges that their community mental health providers are experiencing, because, these are the individuals that I'm advocating for in regards to workforce are people that live in 67 counties. They're constituents of the legislators. And so, it's not just coming here to Montgomery, it's going across the state. It would help employees across the state.
Well, let me ask you this, because, when you are, wanting for employees, wanting for workers, and you talked about the recruiting and all that. So it seems like everybody might be a little stretched thin. And so does that impact the quality of service that your providers can offer? I mean, that seems like that would be a natural effect.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw a recent survey that I think 85% of community mental health workers are experiencing some type of burnout. It absolutely impacts services. And as we lose employees and we have more vacancies, that increases caseloads. So, the higher the caseload, the more people that a clinician might have to serve. That the quality is definitely going to be impacted. When you don't have individuals that are making a living wage working in a residential home. That the types of people that you can recruit at that level, quality definitely is impacted.
Do you think it helps your case that mental health and the importance of it has been lifted? If this was 15 years ago, it'd be a tough case to make.
It would.
But do you think it helps that, we're talking about it? It's on every, the speaker has really made an issue of this. He was telling me the other day that he was invited to speak at a national conference about like the example of paying more attention. But he also was sure to mention that, look, yeah, we've done some good things in mental health, but we had a long way to go because we had been so far behind. So does it help your case that more attention has been paid?
Oh, absolutely. Just our group alone wouldn't be raising the awareness and the need for these services and this investment in access to care. The general public cares more. I think people are more comfortable talking. Stigma is, to me, stigma is the biggest barrier to care in the mental health field. And, we are just reducing stigma every day. Every time someone shares their story, every time someone is willing to even say, I have a family member that's suffering. I think we all can, if we're honest with ourselves, can say we know someone that might benefit from these services. And so when you make that personal connection, legislators are just people. And so they have connections to this cause as well. And I just wholeheartedly appreciate their interest in trying to, really invest in the system.
Switching gears, we're all just continued to be horrified by the Dadeville shooting. And, we don't know everything about it. We don't know, there are plenty of information gaps and everything. But I remember the day after, Monday, the school superintendent there in Tallapoosa County made sure to say, because kids were coming back to school, these are their classmates, some of them that were killed, made sure to say we're going to have counseling and all that. And it struck me that that was in every story, but I don't really have a frame of reference for how that works. What is this? Some of your providers that provide some of that care? What happens when, in the wake of some of these shootings, the kind of counseling and the trauma that goes on?
Todd, my heart is with Dadeville. And all of the families and the victims. Unfortunately, mental health plays a big role in some of these situations. And yes, several of my members deployed therapists to the schools, and there were therapists at all the schools that had individuals that were impacted. And I have to thank the legislature again, because they have continuously invested in what we call the School-Based Mental Health Collaborative. And what that does is it places therapists in schools, and it pays for a therapist to be in the school so that students can receive services at a school. And so therefore, they were able to deploy those therapists, and they had the relationships with the schools already, so that it wasn't, they weren't scrambling on Monday morning. And so I just appreciate those community mental health. That's what community mental health is. It's being there for the community.
And it's unfortunate we bring it up as a part of this terrible tragedy, but it's more than just traumatic situations, tragedies. It's every day. Yep. These schools now have more resources, mental health counselors and everything, than they used to have on a day-to-day basis.
Yep. Yeah. And teachers continue to say that mental health is one of their top concerns in regards to the students. And so, we have to continue investing in that. And like I said, the legislature has been investing in school-based mental health.
Well, we will be following this budget process as it goes forward. I really appreciate you sort of, explaining why it matters and why we go through budgets all the time. We see these line items, but maybe we don't understand exactly what it means. It sounds like it's pretty important. I really appreciate you coming on and explaining that to me and our viewers.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Todd. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page.
Tuscumbia native Helen Keller is popularly remembered as the deaf and blind child who learned sign language from her teacher Ann Sullivan at the Keller home, Ivy Green. But during her adult life, she was a tireless activist on behalf of workers and women's rights, a prolific author, and an unofficial U.S. ambassador to the world. Her most famous publication is her best-selling 1903 autobiography, The Story of My Life. Through her work with the American Foundation for the Blind, Keller advocated for broadened educational and employment possibilities for blind people, and the State Department funded her international travel and advocacy of people with disabilities. In 1964, President Lyndon Johnson awarded her the Congressional Medal of Freedom. A bronze statue depicting a young Helen Keller represents Alabama in the U.S. Capitol, and she is featured on our state quarter.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week starting Monday with our regular coverage of the Alabama Legislature each night at 10:30 right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capital Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.